Hercule Poirot and the 12th Stroke of Death. Chapter 1. An Invitation to Shadows. The letter arrived on the morning of December 30th. Its envelope thick as a tombstone and stamped with a crest I did not recognize. Poirot studied it with the intensity of a botanist examining a rare orchid. "Observe the urgency in the penmanship, Hastings," he said, tapping a gloved finger at the jagged script. "The crossbar of the T slashes like a dagger. The writer is a man who fears the blade already presses at his throat." He read aloud, "Monsieur Poirot, you will think me presumptuous, but I have heard you possess a singular talent for sniffing out rot before the maggots settle. I require this talent. Tomorrow evening I host a New Year's gathering at Whitcomb Hall. Among my guests lurks a viper. I cannot name it, but I feel its bite imminent. Attend and name your fee. Refuse, and you may read of my demise in the Times." "Alaric Whitcomb. Melodramatic," I remarked. "But you're going, of course?" Poirot smoothed his already immaculate tie. "Certainement. A man who compares himself to a corpse is either a fool or a prophet. Lord Whitcomb, I think, is both." The snow began falling as our train pulled into the little station of Marlow Heath, a frail powder that dusted the countryside like icing sugar. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in his winter overcoat and patent leather shoes, tutted at the flakes settling on his sleeves. "Nature, Hastings," he murmured, flicking one away with fastidious care. "She is a romantic, but not a tidy one." A motor car awaited us, its driver a gaunt man in livery who loaded our luggage without a word. We wound through skeletal hedgerows and frosted fields, the dusk bleeding into an indigo evening. Then, quite suddenly, the trees parted to reveal Whitcomb Hall, a hulking Elizabethan manor, its mullioned windows glowing amber against the encroaching dark. Pinnacles of snow crowned the rooftop gargoyles, their stone faces twisted as though frozen mid-scream. "Cheerful place," I remarked. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, but observe the symmetry of the east wing, Hastings. Such balance. It promises order beneath the gloom." I doubted it. The house seemed to brood over the land, its shadow stretching long and hungry across the drive. We were greeted in the grand hall by Lord Alaric Whitcomb himself, a man whose presence filled the room like a thunderclap. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a mane of silver hair and a beard trimmed to military precision, he clasped Poirot's hand with a grip that might have felled an ox. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. Let us hope your little grey cells are sharper than the fools at Scotland Yard." His laugh boomed off the vaulted ceiling, but the jest carried an edge, like a blade sheathed in velvet. "And this must be Captain Hastings," he said, turning to me. "The chronicler of genius. Tell me, do you ever tire of playing Watson to his Holmes?" Before I could muster a retort, Poirot intervened smoothly. "You flatter me, Lord Whitcomb, but I sense this is not a social call. Why have you summoned us?" The Baron's smile faded. He gestured to a tapestry depicting a stag hunt, its threads frayed and faded. "Because, monsieur, there are wolves at my door, and one of them," he said, lowering his voice, "intends to make a kill tonight." The party assembled for dinner was a study in contrasts. Lady Seraphina Whitcomb, our host's wife, glided into the dining room like a wraith, her ivory gown and platinum hair giving her the spectral air of a woman already half a ghost. She could not have been older than 30, her beauty sharp and cold as a diamond, yet when her husband spoke, her fingers tightened around her wine-glass as though she wished to crush it. Dr. Lucian Graves, seated to my left, was a cadaverous man with a nicotine-stained moustache and eyes that darted like startled fish. He spoke little, but when Lord Whitcomb mentioned his railways, the doctor's fork clattered against his plate. Your trains, he said thinly, have a habit of leaving scars, my lord. Miss Genevieve Hartley, the Baron's niece, proved the sole spark of warmth at the table. A vivacious brunette with a laugh like chiming bells, she teased Poirot about his terrifying moustache, then sobered abruptly when her uncle mentioned her recent disinheritance. A trifling matter, she said, swirling her claret. Money is such a vulgar motive for murder, don't you think? Mr. Silas Mercer, a bull-necked industrialist, grunted into his soup. Speak for yourself, girl. Some of us earned our fortunes. By swindling widows and orphans, no doubt, purred Mrs. Isabella Vane. The widow, a striking woman in emerald silk, examined Mercer through a lorgnette. But then, we all have our hobbies. The conversation turned brittle as overstretched wire. Lord Whitcomb regaled us with tales of his youth, fox hunts, duels, a doomed expedition to the Amazon, while his guests picked at their pheasant like vultures, too sated to feast. Only Poirot seemed untroubled, his chatter of Belgian cuisine and the proper starching of shirts, a deliberate counterpoint to the tension. It was Mrs. Vane who first noticed the clock. How peculiar, she said, nodding at the grandfather timepiece in the corner. Its brass face read 11:55, though my own watch showed 10:30. Does time bend to your will here, Alaric? Lord Whitcomb scowled. The damn thing's been erratic all week. Trent, his secretary, a ferret-faced young man hovering near the sideboard, jumped as though scalded. Yes, my lord. Fetch Hodges to fix that eyesore before midnight. I won't have the new year rung in by a stammering chronometer. As Trent scurried out, Miss Hartley leaned toward Poirot. Poor Victor. Uncle's been working him like a pack mule since sacking the butler. I'd say the man's at his breaking point, wouldn't you? Poirot dabbed his lips with a napkin. Breaking points, mademoiselle, are where the cracks let in the light. Midnight approached. We gathered in the hall, champagne flutes in hand, as the guests' reflections warped in the ancient lead-light windows. Outside, fireworks bloomed against the sky, crimson peonies and sapphire chrysanthemums that cast fleeting shadows over the room. Lord Whitcomb raised his glass. To the future, may it be less tedious than the past. The clock began its dolorous chime. Bong! Lady Seraphina flinched. Bong! Dr. Graves' hand trembled, sloshing champagne onto his cuff. Bong! Mrs. Vane's lips moved soundlessly, her gaze locked on Whitcomb. Bong! At the 12th stroke, the Baron convulsed, his glass shattered against the parquet, sherry pooling like blood around his twitching limbs. Lady Seraphina screamed, a sound his twitching limbs. Lady Seraphina screamed, a sound of genuine terror, or perhaps relief, as he collapsed, his face contorted in a rictus of agony. Chaos erupted. Mercer bellowed for a doctor. Miss Hartley fainted artfully into a chair. Mrs. Vane pressed a lace handkerchief to her mouth, though her eyes remained dry. Only Poirot moved with purpose. He crouched beside the body, lifted Whitcomb's wrist, then sniffed the spilled sherry. Strychnine, he said quietly. Quick, mon ami, the clock. The timepiece's hand stood rigid at midnight, but the pendulum hung at an odd angle. As I peered closer, Poirot's gloved finger brushed a bent pinion. Ah, mais oui, sabotaged. Our killer wished to control time itself. As accusations flew, Poirot knelt to examine the hearth. Amid the ashes lay a half-charred diary page, its surviving words etched like an epitaph. The past will bury us all. The clock, now silent, watched over the scene, a sentinel keeping its secrets. Outside, the snow fell thicker, veiling Whitcomb Hall in white. Somewhere in the east wing, a door slammed, or perhaps it was a gunshot. Mr. Mercer barked orders at the servants, his voice sharp with panic. Someone fetch the constable and clear this room. This is a crime scene, for God's sake. Miss Hartley, now revived from her faint, clung to Mrs. Vane's arm, her face pale but composed. "Poor Uncle Alaric," she murmured, though her eyes were dry. "Who could have done this?" Poirot, ever the calm amidst the storm, turned to Victor Trent, who stood trembling near the door. "Monsieur Trent, you will ensure that no one leaves this house until the police arrive. We?" The secretary nodded, though his Adam's apple bobbed nervously. "Yes, of course, but the snow, the roads are impassable. It may be hours before they can reach us." "Then we must make do," Poirot said, his tone brooking no argument. He turned to me. "Hastings, assist me in moving Lord Whitcomb to the drawing-room. We cannot leave him here like this." Together we lifted the Baron's body, his weight surprising for a man of his age. Lady Seraphina averted her eyes as we carried him past, her face a mask of icy composure. The drawing-room, with its heavy velvet drapes and sombre portraits, seemed a fitting temporary resting place. We laid him on a chaise longue, covering him with a blanket procured by a trembling maid. "Poor devil," I muttered, adjusting the blanket to cover his contorted face. "To die like this, on what should have been a night of celebration." Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Celebration, Hastings, is often the mask tragedy wears. But we will uncover the truth, mon ami. Of that you may be certain. By the time the household had settled, or as much as it could under the circumstances, it was nearly 2 in the morning. The guests retired to their rooms, though I doubted any of them slept. Poirot and I were shown to adjoining chambers on the 2nd floor, our luggage having been brought up by a harried footman. As I unpacked my night-clothes, Poirot appeared in the doorway, his expression pensive. "Hastings, lock your door tonight." I blinked. "You think the killer would strike again?" "I think," he said slowly, "that a viper, once unleashed, does not easily return to its basket. Until we know who we are dealing with, caution is our ally." With that he retreated to his room, leaving me to ponder his words. I locked the door as instructed, though the act felt absurdly theatrical. Still, as I lay in the unfamiliar bed, the creaks and groans of the old house seemed to take on a sinister quality. Every footstep in the corridor, every gust of wind against the window, set my nerves on edge. Sleep, when it came, was fitful and haunted by dreams of stopped clocks and shattered glass. Chapter 2. The Labyrinth of Lies. The morning after Lord Whitcomb's death dawned bleak and heavy, the snow outside Whitcomb Hall now a shroud over the estate. The household stirred with a muted tension, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Poirot, ever the early riser, had already commandeered the library for his investigation. By the time I joined him, he was seated at a mahogany desk, a neat stack of notes before him, and a pot of steaming coffee at his elbow. "Ah, Hastings," he greeted me, his eyes twinkling despite the grim circumstances. "Come, sit. We have much to discuss, and the little grey cells, they demand stimulation." I poured myself a cup of coffee and took a seat opposite him. "Where do we begin?" "With the guests, mon ami," Poirot said, tapping his temple. "Each one is a thread in this tapestry of deceit. We must pull gently, lest the whole unravel before we see the pattern." Our first interviewee was Lady Seraphina Whitcomb. She entered the library with the grace of a swan, though her pallor betrayed a sleepless night. She wore a black dressing-gown that swallowed her slender frame, and her platinum hair was swept into a loose chignon. "Lady Whitcomb," Poirot began, rising to offer her a chair, "thank you for speaking with us. This must be a terrible ordeal for you." She nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It is. Alaric was a difficult man, but he did not deserve this." "Difficult in what way?" I asked. She hesitated, her gaze flicking to the fire crackling in the hearth. "Our marriage was not a love match. I was young and he was Alaric. He offered security, and I accepted. But in recent months he had grown distant. He spoke of divorce, of cutting me out of his will." Poirot leaned forward, his expression one of polite interest. "And how did you feel about this, madame?" Her lips tightened. "Relieved, if I am honest. But I did not kill him. I have no need of his money. My family's fortune is my own." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Lady Whitcomb. You have been most helpful." As she left, I turned to Poirot. "Do you believe her?" He sipped his coffee. "She's hiding something, but whether it is guilt or merely pride, I cannot yet say." Next was Dr. Lucian Graves. The surgeon entered with a scowl, his nicotine-stained moustache twitching as he glared at Poirot. "I hope this won't take long. I have patients to attend to." "Of course, Doctor," Poirot said smoothly. "Please, sit. Tell us about your relationship with Lord Wickham." Graves's jaw tightened. "There was no relationship. He ruined me. His negligence caused a train crash that killed my sister. I lost my license, my reputation, everything." "And yet you accepted his invitation," I pointed out. "I came to confront him," Graves snapped, "to demand restitution." "But I did not kill him. Poison is a coward's weapon." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, Doctor, strychnine is a substance you would have access to, no?" Graves' face turned ashen. Graves' face turned ashen. Yes, but my medical bag was stolen weeks ago. I reported it to the police." "Convenient," I muttered under my breath. Poirot dismissed him with a polite nod. "Thank you, Doctor. We may need to speak with you again." Miss Genevieve Hartley was our third interviewee. She swept into the library with a vivacity that seemed out of place in the sombre atmosphere, her brunette curls bouncing with each step. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, flashing a dazzling smile. "How may I assist you?" "Tell us about your uncle," Poirot said, gesturing for her to sit. Her smile faltered. "Uncle Alaric was complicated. He could be charming, but he was also ruthless. When I refused to marry the man he chose for me, he disinherited me, said I was ungrateful." "And how did you feel about that?" I asked. She shrugged, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of anger. "I was furious, of course, but I didn't kill him. Money isn't worth hanging for." Poirot studied her intently. "And yet, mademoiselle, you were heard arguing with him last night." Her cheeks flushed. "He insulted my mother. I lost my temper, but I didn't poison him." As she left, Poirot murmured, "A spirited young woman." But spirit can sometimes lead to recklessness. After the interviews, Poirot led me to the grandfather clock in the hall, its brass face still read midnight, the hands frozen in place. "Observe, Hastings," he said, pointing to the pendulum. "It is bent, tampered with. The killer wished to control time, to create an alibi." I frowned. "But why go to such lengths?" "Because, mon ami, the killer is clever. They knew the clock would draw attention, that we would focus on the stopped hands and miss the true clue." "Which is?" He smiled enigmatically. "Patience, Hastings. All will be revealed in due time." As we returned to the library, I noticed something glinting beneath the sofa. Retrieving it, I held up a silver cufflink engraved with the initials S.M. "Silas Mercer!" I exclaimed. Poirot took the cufflink, examining it closely. "Perhaps, her, but let us not jump to conclusions. Initials can be misleading." "But Mercer was arguing with Whitcomb last night," I protested. Miss Hartley saw him." "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes twinkling. "But Miss Hartley is not the most reliable witness. None. She has her own secrets to hide." Our final interviewee was Mrs. Isabella Vane. The widow entered with a regal air, her emerald silk gown rustling softly. She took a seat by the fire, her lorgnette dangling from a chain around her neck. "Mrs. Vane," Poirot began, "thank you for speaking with us. You were acquainted with Lord Whitcomb for many years, oui?" She nodded, her expression unreadable. "We were engaged once, but he abandoned me to marry a wealthier woman. I thought I had put it behind me, but seeing him again, it stirred old wounds." "And yet you accepted his invitation," I said. She smiled faintly. "Curiosity, Captain Hastings. I wanted to see what had become of the man who broke my heart." Poirot leaned forward. "And what did you see, madame?" Her smile faded. "A man haunted by his past. He spoke of making amends, of righting old wrongs, but I did not believe him. And now—" She spread her hands. "Now it is too late." As she left, Poirot turned to me. "A woman of contradictions, Hastings. She mourns him, yet she does not grieve." By the end of the day, the library was a maze of notes and theories. Poirot sat at the desk, his fingers steepled, his expression one of intense concentration. "What do we know, Hastings?" he asked. "We know Lord Whitcomb was poisoned with strychnine," I said. "We know the clock was tampered with, and we have a cufflink with the initials as M. We also know that nearly everyone at the party had a motive to kill him." "Exactement," Poirot said. "But the key lies not in the motives, but in the details. The bent pendulum, the cufflink, the charred diary page, they are pieces of a puzzle. And when we fit them together, the picture will be clear." As the fire crackled in the hearth, I felt a shiver of anticipation. The game was afoot, and Poirot was in his element. Chapter 3. Blood on the Frost. The dawn crept over Whitcomb Hall like a thief, its pale light glinting off the frost-kissed grounds. I awoke to the sound of distant shouts, a stable boy's panicked cries, slicing through the morning stillness. Poirot, already dressed and peering out the window with the intensity of a hawk, turned to me. "Vite, Hastings! The game advances!" We followed the commotion to the frozen lake, its surface veined with cracks like shattered glass. Near the boathouse, a cluster of servants huddled, their breath curling into the frigid air. The stable hand, a gangly youth named Tom, stood trembling at the door, his face the colour of curdled milk. I only came to fetch the ice cutters," he stammered, pointing a shaking finger inside. "Then I seen him just lying there." Poirot brushed past him, and I followed, my stomach tightening. Victor Trent lay sprawled on the boathouse floor, his head caved in by a vicious blow. Blood stained the wooden planks beneath him, dark and congealed. A rusted fireplace poker lay nearby, its handle flecked with crimson. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, crouching to examine the wound. A crime of passion, this, no calculation, only rage. I forced myself to look away, focusing instead on the surroundings. Shelves of rotting fishing tackle lined the walls, and the scent of mildew clung to the air. Trent's overcoat hung neatly on a hook, its pockets turned inside out. "Robbery?" I ventured. Poirot shook his head. "None, a ruse. Observe." He lifted Trent's right hand, the fingers stiff with rigor mortis. "His signet ring remains. A thief would have taken it." He plucked a small, leather-bound notebook from Trent's breast pocket. Its pages were filled with cryptic symbols, numbers, initials, and dates. "A cipher," Poirot said, eyes gleaming. "How provocative." Back in the library, Poirot spread the notebook on the desk, his nimble fingers tracing the coded entries. Lady Seraphina, Dr. Graves, and Silas Mercer lingered in the hall, their whispers sharp as knives. "Ah, this is elementary," Poirot declared at last. "The numbers correspond to sums of money, the initials recipients of bribes." He flipped to a page marked SM, £500, 12 November, and another, LG, £300, 7 December. Silas Mercer and Dr. Lucian Graves, I said, but why would Trent be blackmailing them? Poirot steepled his fingers. Consider Mercer's railway contracts and Graves's need to rebuild his career. Trent, as Whitcomb's secretary, knew their secrets and profited from their silence. But Trent's dead now, I said. The killer could be Mercer or Graves covering their tracks. Or another, Poirot said. Another, Poirot said, who wished to bury Trent's knowledge forever. In Trent's waistcoat we found an iron key, small and unremarkable. Poirot held the iron key aloft, its teeth catching the cold blue gleam of dawn. A puzzle, Hastings. Small, unremarkable, yet most consequential, I suspect. We picked our way across the frost-rimed gravel, our breath hanging in ghostly plumes. The estate sprawled in muted tones, pale lavender sky bleeding into skeletal trees, the lake a sheet of smoked glass. Mrs. Hodges, the housekeeper, answered our knock with a candle in hand, her mob cap askew. "At this hour? The sun's not yet proper up." Poirot proffered the key. "Pardonnez-moi, madame, have you seen this?" She squinted, her face a relief map of wrinkles. "Not likely." His lordship kept his study locked tighter than a vicar's cellar. Mr. Trent had the only key, excepting the master. "And where might Trent have used it?" I pressed. She shrugged. "Dare say you'll find naught but dust and debts in that room. Men and their secrets, always burying 'em in paper." In the study, dawn's feeble light seeped through the drapes. Poirot circled the desk like a terrier at a rat hole, pausing at the bust of Caesar. "Observe, Hastings, this marble fellow sits crooked. A man of Lord Whitcomb's fastidiousness would never allow such disorder." He lifted the bust, revealing a keyhole beneath. The iron key slid home with a click. The drawer yawned open, exhaling the scent of cedar and decay. Beneath ledgers detailing railway profits lay a bundle of letters, their ribbon the faded red of old blood. Poirot read aloud, "My dearest Alaric, each moment apart is an eternity. When may we meet again? Your wife grows suspicious, and I fear." The signature was torn away. "Love letters," I said, "but not to Lady Seraphina." Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, where Lady Seraphina stood alone in the garden, her black gown stark against the snow. "Au contraire, Hastings, the handwriting matches hers." I stared. "But she's his wife. Why write clandestine notes?" "Because," Poirot said softly, "they were not meant for Lord Whitcomb." We reconvened in the drawing-room, the guests arrayed like actors awaiting their cue. Lady Seraphina clutched a handkerchief, her composure fraying. Dr. Graves reeked of brandy, and Mercer paced like a caged bear. "2 murders," Poirot announced, "but 1 killer?" "No. Lord Whitcomb's death was calculated, strychnine, a sabotaged clock. Trent's was impulsive, brutal, yet they are connected by fear." Miss Hartley leaned forward, her voice trembling. "Fear of what?" "Of secrets unearthed." Poirot held up the ledger. "Monsieur Mercer, you paid Trent £500 in November. For what?" "To hide your bid rigging on the Northern Railway." Mercer's jowls quivered. "Lies! That snivelling worm extorted me." "And you, Dr. Graves," Poirot continued, "paid £300 to conceal your sister's death certificate. A flawed break design, one your employer," he nodded at Mercer, "approved to cut costs." Graves lunged at Mercer, fists raised. You knew the brakes would fail. Poirot stepped between them. Assez. This quarrelling aids only the killer. Later, I found Poirot in the conservatory, studying a withered rose bush. The letters, Hastings, they are the key. Lady Seraphina's lover is among us. But who? He plucked a dead bloom, crumbling it in his palm. Who stands to gain from Whitcomb's death? Not money, but freedom. And who has the skill to manipulate time? And hearts? A shadow fell across the threshold. Dr. Graves, his face haggard. I need to speak with you, alone. As he led us to the lake, the ice groaned underfoot. Trent didn't just blackmail me, he said, halting at the boathouse. He knew about the affair. Seraphina and we... God help me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You loved her. And she loved Whitcomb's fortune, Graves spat. But Trent threatened to expose us unless she paid. Last night she begged me to silence him. And did you? I demanded. Before he could answer, a scream pierced the air. We turned to see Mrs. Vane pointing at the lake's edge, where Miss Hartley stood, a bloody ice axe in her hand, staring at the body of Silas Mercer. Miss Hartley stood frozen at the lake's edge, the ice axe slipping from her grip. It clattered against the frozen shore, its blade glinting crimson in the pallid dawn light. At her feet lay Silas Mercer, his face a mask of shock, his throat split open like a grotesque second mouth. Poirot surged forward, pulling her back from the grisly scene. Mademoiselle, do not touch anything. She stared at her hands, trembling. I found him like this. Mrs. Vane's scream had drawn the others. Lady Seraphina hovered at the garden's edge, her hands pressed to her mouth, while Dr. Graves shouldered past, medical bag in tow. He knelt beside Mercer, though one glance confirmed the futility. Dead, carotid artery severed, quick but messy. Poirot turned to Miss Hartley. What brought you here, mademoiselle? The hour is ungodly for a stroll. I couldn't sleep, she whispered. I heard footsteps outside my window. I thought it might be the killer. And so you armed yourself with an ice axe? I asked, dubious. She flushed. It was leaning against the greenhouse. I took it for protection. Convenient, muttered Mercer's valet, a wiry man named Briggs. Found him with the murder weapon, didn't you? Poirot silenced him with a look. We will adjourn to the house, Hastings. Fetch Constable Hardy from the village. The snow has eased. He may yet navigate the roads. The household gathered in stunned silence. Miss Hartley sat by the fire, a blanket draped over her shoulders, her teacup rattling in its saucer. Poirot paced before the hearth, the ice axe now wrapped in a linen cloth. Monsieur Mercer was killed with a single, savage strike, he declared. The blade entered here. He traced a line beneath his jaw, suggesting the killer stood behind him, perhaps in conversation. There are no defensive wounds. He trusted his assailant. Lady Seraphina shuddered. But why kill him? He had nothing to do with Alaric's death. Did he not? Poirot produced Trent's ledger. Mercer paid Trent £500 to conceal his bid rigging on the Northern Railway, a scheme that would have ruined Whitcomb's reputation. With both men dead, the truth dies with them. Dr. Graves snorted. Or the killer seeks to frame me. That's strychnine in my bag. Planted, I tell you. Mrs. Vane's lorgnette glinted as she studied Miss Hartley. Oh, what of you, my dear? You inherit nothing. Yet you linger like a bad penny. Why? Miss Hartley shot to her feet, the blanket falling. How dare you? I love my uncle even if he disinherited you, Mrs. Vane finished. Or was it you he disowned, finished? Or was it you he disowned? We reconvened in the drawing-room, the guests arrayed like actors awaiting their cue. Lady Seraphina clutched a handkerchief, her composure fraying. Dr. Graves reeked of brandy, and Mercer paced like a caged bear. 2 murders, Poirot announced, but 1 killer? No. Lord Whitcomb's death was calculated, strychnine, a sabotaged clock. Trent's was impulsive, brutal, yet they are connected by fear. Miss Hartley leaned forward, her voice trembling. Fear of what? Of secrets unearthed. Poirot held up the ledger. Monsieur Mercer, you paid Trent £500 in November. For what? To hide your bid-rigging on the Northern Railway? Mercer's jowls quivered. Lies! That snivelling worm extorted me. And you, Dr. Graves, Poirot continued, paid £300 to conceal your sister's death certificate. A flawed break design we, your employer, he nodded at Mercer, approved to cut costs. Graves lunged at Mercer, fists raised. You knew the brakes would fail? Poirot stepped between them. I say, this quarrelling aids only the killer. Later, I found Poirot in the conservatory, studying a withered rosebush. The letters, Hastings, they are the key. Lady Seraphina's lover is among us. But who? He plucked a dead bloom, crumbling it in his palm. Who stands to gain from Whitcomb's death? Not money, but freedom. And who has the skill to manipulate time and hearts? A shadow fell across the threshold. Dr. Graves, his face haggard. I need to speak with you alone. As he led us to the lake, the ice groaned underfoot. Trent didn't just blackmail me, he said, halting at the boathouse. He knew about the affair. Seraphina and I, God help me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You loved her, and she loved Whitcomb's fortune, Graves spat. But Trent threatened to expose us unless she paid. Last night she begged me to silence him. And did you? I demanded. Before he could answer, a scream pierced the air. We turned to see Mrs. Vane pointing at the lake's edge, where Miss Hartley stood, a bloody ice axe in her hand, staring at the body of Silas Mercer. Miss Hartley stood frozen at the lake's edge, the ice axe slipping from her grip. It clattered against the frozen shore, its blade glinting crimson in the pallid dawn light. At her feet lay Silas Mercer, his face a mask of shock, his throat split open like a grotesque second mouth. Poirot surged forward, pulling her back from the grisly scene. Mademoiselle, do not touch anything. She stared at her hands, trembling. I didn't. I found him like this. Mrs. Vane's scream had drawn the others. Lady Seraphina hovered at the garden's edge, her hands pressed to her mouth, while Dr. Graves shouldered past, medical bag in tow. He knelt beside Mercer, though one glance confirmed the futility. Dead, carotid artery severed, quick but messy. Poirot turned to Miss Hartley. What brought you here, mademoiselle? The hour is ungodly for a stroll. I couldn't sleep, she whispered. I heard footsteps outside my window. I thought it might be the killer. And so you armed yourself with an ice axe? I asked, dubious. She flushed. It was leaning against the greenhouse. I took it for protection. Convenient, uttered Mercer's valet, a wiry man named Briggs. Found him with the murder weapon, didn't you? Poirot silenced him with a look. We will adjourn to the house. Hastings, fetch Constable Hardy from the village. The snow has eased. He may yet navigate the roads. The household gathered in stunned silence. Miss Hartley sat by the fire, a blanket draped over her shoulders, her teacup rattling in its saucer. Poirot paced before the hearth, the ice axe now wrapped in a linen cloth. Monsieur Mercer was killed with a single, savage strike, he declared. The blade entered here, he traced a line beneath his jaw, suggesting the killer stood behind him, perhaps in conversation. There are no defensive wounds. He trusted his assailant. Lady Seraphina shuddered. But why kill him? He had nothing to do with Alaric's death. Did he not? Poirot produced Trent's ledger. Mercer paid Trent £500 to conceal his bid rigging on the Northern Railway, a scheme that would have ruined Whitcomb's reputation. With both men dead, the truth dies with them. Dr. Graves snorted, or the killer seeks to frame me. That's strychnine in my bag, planted, I tell you. Mrs. Vane's lorgnette glinted as she studied Miss Hartley. And what of you, my dear? You inherit nothing, yet you linger like a bad penny. Why? Miss Hartley shot to her feet, the blanket falling. How dare you? I love my uncle, even if he disinherited you? Mrs. Vane finished. Or was it you he disowned? Poirot clapped his hands. I say, we will not try the case with hysterics. Hastings, the letters! I handed him the bundle from Whitcomb's desk. He untied the ribbon, revealing a stack of telegrams. These were hidden with the love letters. They detail Mercer's bribes to delay the inquest into Dr. Graves's sister's death. A cover-up, non? Graves lunged at the dead man's corpse. You bastard! You knew the brakes were faulty. You let her die? Poirot barred his path. Control yourself, Doctor. Vigilante justice aids no one. Later, as Constable Hardy took statements, Poirot examined the ice axe. Observe, Hastings. The blood is fresh, but the rust here, he pointed to the handle, suggests it was taken from the greenhouse days ago. Premeditation. Then Miss Hartley's story about grabbing it this morning is a lie? Or the killer wishes us to think so. He peeled back the linen, revealing a smudge of lavender oil on the handle. The same scent worn by two women in this house. A maid scurried past, her arms piled with linens. Poirot halted her. Mademoiselle, who requested fresh towels for the conservatory this morning? Mrs. Vane, sir, said she needed to air out the damp. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A curious task for a guest. Come, Hastings, we must pay the conservatory another visit. Chapter 4. Portraits of the Past. The conservatory's skeletal frame loomed under a leaden sky, its shattered panes rattling like old bones in the wind. Poirot picked his way through the debris of Whitcomb Hall's forgotten grandeur, a cracked sundial, a fern strangled by ivy, while I trailed behind, my breath fogging the frost-bitten air. A mausoleum of memories, Hastings, he murmured, pausing before a shrouded easel. And here I think we shall find the key to 2 murders. He pulled the dustcloth free, revealing a portrait of a young woman with storm-grey eyes and auburn hair. The inscription on the gilded frame read, Eleanor Standish, 1898. Mrs. Vane's twin, I said, though the truth struck me even as I spoke. Her younger self, Poirot corrected. Lord Whitcomb's first fiancée, presumed drowned, but very much alive. Come, we must invite her to revisit the past. We found Mrs. Vane in the morning room, her needlework abandoned. She stiffened at the sight of the portrait, but did not flinch. You are Eleanor Standish, Poirot said, not unkindly. Lord Whitcomb staged your death to marry Cecilia Montague for her fortune. You reinvented yourself as Isabella Vane, widow of a Venetian count, and returned to haunt him. Her composure cracked like fine porcelain. Yes, I came to confront him, to force him to see me. But when I arrived, he was already a ghost of the man I'd loved, haunted, paranoid. He spoke of making amends, but I wanted no part of his guilt. Yet you stayed, I pressed. To remind him that the past cannot be buried, she said, her voice trembling. But I did not kill him. Or Mercer. Poirot studied her. You wear lavender water, madame, a scent also found on the ice axe that killed Mr. Mercer. She blinked. I spilled my perfume vial yesterday. The maid can attest to it. A partial truth, but Poirot let it linger. We returned to the lake, now thawing at its edges. Poirot knelt where Mercer's body had lain, tracing faint boot prints in the slush. 2 sets, Hastings, one large, one small. Miss Hartley's slippers matched the latter, but the former—" He produced the ice axe, its rusted handle smudged with lavender oil. The killer wore boots, planted the axe and fled. Miss Hartley, hearing the commotion, grabbed the weapon in panic, leaving her prints atop the killer's. But the lavender oil, a ruse, the killer doused the handle to implicate Mrs. Vane or Lady Seraphina, yet observe, he scraped the rust with his penknife. This axe sat outdoors for weeks. Only someone who frequented the greenhouse, like Dr. Graves, would know its location. In the study, Poirot reconstructed Trent's charred diary page. The decoded entry read, "Mercer to expose Graves's malpractice. Demands £1,000. Silence." "Graves killed Trent to protect his secret," I said. Then Mercer, fearing exposure, confronted him and was silenced, Poirot finished. But the strychnine, the distraction? Graves wished us to believe Whitcomb's death was his work while Mercer's murder was passion. 2 crimes, 2 methods, linked by fear. Dusk found us in the conservatory once more. Poirot lifted Eleanor's portrait, revealing a hollow behind the frame, a stack of telegrams detailing Graves' malpractice cover-up. "He orchestrated it all," I said. "But why frame Miss Hartley?" "Her feud with Whitcomb made her an easy suspect, but haste breeds error." Poirot pointed to a telegram's date, sent an hour after Mercer's death. Graves could not have dispatched this from a snowbound estate. An accomplice? No, a miscalculation. As night fell, a figure slipped into the woods, a man's silhouette, limping slightly. Graves, fleeing toward the village. Poirot sighed. "The doctor's guilt is plain, but the why eludes me. What drove a healer to kill?" Chapter 5. The Cufflink and the Blacksmith. The village pub huddled at the edge of Marlow Heath like a wary sentinel, its sagging timber beams and smoke-stained windows a testament to centuries of whispered secrets. Inside, the air hung thick with the tang of ale and wood smoke, the hearth crackling with a fire that did little to dispel the chill seeping through the stone floors. Poirot brushed a cobweb from his sleeve as we settled into a corner booth, the villagers' stares prickling the back of my neck. 2 whiskies, I said to the barkeep, a burly man with a scar bisecting his brow. "Make it coffee," Poirot corrected, his nose wrinkling at the sticky table. "Strong, if such a thing is possible in this establishment." The barkeep grunted, slamming down 2 chipped mugs. "You're the ones from the manor, eh? Come to stir up more trouble?" Poirot ignored him, withdrawing the silver cufflink from his pocket. Its initials, S.M., glinted in the firelight. "Tell me, monsieur, do you recognize this craftsmanship?" A grizzled man hunched at the bar, turned, his spectacles perched on a nose veined with broken capillaries. "Let's see." He snatched the cufflink, squinting through a jeweler's loop. I made this for Samuel Webb 10 years back. Fine hand he had. To Whitcomb ruined him." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "The initials as Queets Zrenia." The engraver jabbed a gnarled finger at the script. "See the serif here? That's a W, done fancy-like. Webb's father was Samuel Senior. The lad kept the name, though there's little left of his pride now." "Where might we find this, Mr. Webb?" The barkeep snorted. "Try the old forge. He's been holed up there since Whitcomb seized his land. Mad as a March hare, that one." The forge crouched at the village outskirts, its chimney belching acrid smoke into the slate-grey sky. Rain lashed the cobblestones as we approached, the rhythmic clang of hammer on iron growing louder. Inside, Samuel Webb worked shirtless at the anvil, muscles corded like ironwood, his face streaked with soot and sweat. "Monsieur Webb?" Poirot called over the din. The blacksmith wheeled around, tongs gripping a glowing horseshoe. "Who's asking?" Poirot held up the cufflink. "This is yours, Noel. A memento of better days." Webb's eyes narrowed. "What of it?" "You forged it for Lord Whitcomb's staff, yet kept one for yourself. A small rebellion?" The horseshoe hissed as Webb plunged it into a water barrel. "A reminder of what he took from me." Poirot stepped closer, his voice low. "You tampered with the Manners clock, bent the pendulum. Why?" Webb's laugh was a dry rasp. To watch him squirm, every chime a little torment. "But I didn't kill him. Death's too kind for the likes of him." "And the cufflink?" "Stolen from my workshop weeks ago. Reckon the real killer wanted to point you my way." A gust of wind rattled the forge's shutters. Webb's gaze drifted to a rusted portrait on the wall, a younger, prouder man standing beside a forge now reduced to rubble. "He took my livelihood, my name. Broke the clock to break him. But murder?" He spat into the coals. "I've sins enough without adding that." Night had fallen by the time we returned to Whitcomb Hall, the Manor's silhouette a jagged wound against the storm. As we shook the rain from our coats, a frantic knock echoed through the grand hall. Mrs. Hodges, the housekeeper, burst in, her face ashen. "It's come again, that devil bird!" On the doorstep lay a raven, its feathers slick with rain, a scrap of parchment tied to its leg. Poirot untied it, his lips thinning as he read. 3 down. "Who's next?" Lady Seraphina drifted down the stairs, her pallor ghostly in the lamplight. "What does it mean?" "It means," Poirot said quietly, "our killer is not yet finished." In the study, Poirot spread the note beside the cufflink and a sketch of the sabotaged pendulum. Webb's confession explains the clock but not the poison link, and a sketch of the sabotaged pendulum. Webb's confession explains the clock but not the poison, and this, he tapped the raven's message, suggests a mind fond of theatrics. "Could Webb have an accomplice?" I ventured. "None. His hatred is solitary, like his forge, but the cufflink thief knew his history, and ours." Rain drummed the windows, each drop a metronome counting down to the next tragedy. Somewhere in the house a floorboard creaked. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The killer plays a game, Hastings, and we are the pawns." Chapter 6. The Forgotten Heir. The solicitor's office in Lincoln's Inn was a relic of another era, its oak-panelled walls steeped in the musty scent of yellowed parchment and beeswax. Poirot and I had taken the early train to London, and as we stepped inside, dust motes pirouetted in the thin shafts of afternoon light filtering through grimy windows. A grandfather clock loomed in the corner, its pendulum slicing the silence with a relentless tick-tock. I shifted uncomfortably in a horsehair chair, its prickling upholstery a far cry from the plush comforts of Whitcomb Hall. Mr. Reginald Thorne, the solicitor, adjusted his pince-nez with ink-stained fingers, his voice quavering as if the weight of the law itself pressed upon him. "You understand, Monsieur Poirot, this is highly irregular. Lord Whitcomb's will was sealed upon his death. To breach its confidentiality now—" Poirot leaned forward, his cane striking the floor with a crack that made Thorne flinch. "A man lies poisoned, another strangled, and the truth, monsieur, is entombed within these papers. You shall unseal it, or I shall summon Scotland Yard to do so." Thorne blanched, but complied, slicing the dossier's frayed ribbon with a bone-handled letter-opener. The document crackled as he unfolded it, its script a spider's web of loops and flourishes. "To my beloved niece, Genevieve Hartley, I leave the sum of £500, Thorne read, his voice trembling. "To Dr. Lucian Graves, my gold pocket watch. To Silas Mercer." He trailed off, squinting. "Ah, a peculiar clause here. The entirety of my estate, including Whitcomb Hall and its holdings, shall pass to E.W., my first and only true heir. I leaned forward, the chair creaking beneath me. E.W.? But Lady Seraphina is his wife. Eleanor Whitcomb, Poirot interjected, his eyes gleaming. The woman he claimed drowned 25 years ago, the woman who, in fact, became Mrs. Isabella Vane Thorne, blinked, owl-like, behind his spectacles. I was unaware of any such beneficiary. The will was amended 6 months prior to Lord Whitcomb's death, but the initials were never expanded. Poirot rose abruptly, his movements precise as a clockwork figure. A ruse, Hastings. The will is no testament, it is a provocation. Lord Whitcomb knew his killer sought not wealth, but retribution. By naming Eleanor, he forced her hand, luring her into the light. Later, in the dim glow of the office's green-shaded lamp, Poirot spread the charred remnants of Lord Whitcomb's diary across the solicitor's desk. The fragments, painstakingly salvaged from the hearth, resembled a jigsaw puzzle, scorched by malice. "Observe," Poirot said, aligning 2 brittle edges. The script, though fragmented, hissed with accusation. Graves approved the faulty breaks, covered up the report, my silence bought. I stiffened, the words striking me like a blow. Dr. Graves knew the trains were unsafe, but his sister died in that crash. Précisément. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Lord Whitcomb bribed Graves to conceal the truth, that his own negligence killed his sister. The doctor's guilt festered until vengeance became his only balm. Thorne dabbed his brow with a handkerchief, the clock's ticking swelling in the silence. But why leave such a damning record? To torment, Poirot replied. Lord Whitcomb was a man who collected secrets as others collect art. This diary was his gallery and his downfall. As dusk crept over, Poirot stood at the window, the fog weaving a shroud around the spires of the inns of court. I watched him, the weight of revelation pressing heavily in the dusty air. "It is as I said, mon ami," he murmured, his reflection ghostly in the glass. "The truth is a mosaic. Even broken, it reveals the picture." I frowned at the diary fragments. But how do the will and the diary connect? If Graves sought justice for his sister, why kill Trent? Trent discovered the cover-up, Poirot said, turning to face me. He blackmailed Graves, forcing the doctor's hand, and Eleanor, Mrs. Vane, her return, threatened to expose Whitcomb's original sin, faking her death to marry Cecilia Montague. 2 crimes, Hastings, born of one man's avarice. The clock's ticking swelled, a drum roll for the final act. As we exited the solicitor's office, the fog clung to the streets like a mourner's veil. Poirot paused beneath a gas lamp, its feeble glow carving shadows into his face. "You are troubled, Hastings." "It's the cruelty of it all," I said. "Whitcomb manipulated everyone, Graves, Mrs. Vane, even his own niece. What kind of man orchestrates his own destruction?" Poirot's cane tapped the cobblestones. "A man who believes himself untouchable, but pride, mon ami, is the anvil upon which all hubris is shattered." Chapter 7. The Unmasking. The storm outside raged with a fury that rattled the ancient timbers of Whitcomb Hall. Rain lashed against the windows like 1,000 accusing fingers, and the wind howled through the chimneys, an eerie accompaniment to the tension that thickened the air inside the dining room. The guests, now prisoners in this decaying manor, sat huddled in uneasy silence as the grandfather clock, restored to its proper function, struck the hour. Poirot stood at the head of the long dining table, his hands clasped neatly before him, his small frame exuding an air of quiet authority. His sharp green eyes swept over the assembled company, pausing for just a moment longer on each face, as if peeling back their secrets layer by layer. I sat beside him, my nerves taut with anticipation. I had seen this before, this slow, deliberate build-up before the final blow. Poirot took a measured breath before speaking. "Mes amis, the time has come for truth." A murmur rippled through the room. Miss Hartley's fingers tightened around the lace kerchief she held in her lap, while Lady Seraphina, pale as the storm-racked sky outside, kept her gaze fixed on the candlelight trembling in its sconces. Mrs. Vane, ever composed, sat with her hands neatly folded, her expression unreadable. "3 men have died," Poirot continued, his voice a measured cadence. "Lord Whitcomb, whose life was ended by a carefully measured dose of strychnine. Victor Trent, bludgeoned with an ice axe in the boathouse, and Silas Mercer, his throat cut at the edge of the frozen lake." I saw Lady Seraphina flinch at the words, though she said nothing. "There has been much misdirection," Poirot went on, his voice sharper now. "And yet the facts, they do not lie. Let us examine them one final time." He turned, pacing toward the hearth, his hands behind his back. "The poisoning of Lord Whitcomb was not an impulsive act," he said. "No, it was methodical, precise. It required knowledge of both chemistry and human physiology." His eyes locked on to Dr. Graves, who met his gaze unflinchingly. "Strychnine, mes amis, is a poison of great cruelty," Poirot continued. "Its victim suffers a slow, agonizing death, his muscles seizing, his breath stolen from him in spasms. And yet," he raised a finger, "our murderer took pains to delay the symptoms. Lord Whitcomb drank his sherry well before midnight. The poison did not take hold until the stroke of 12. Why?" A pause. No one spoke. "Because," Poirot said, answering himself, "the killer needed a spectacle, a grand performance. He wanted all of us to see Whitcomb die, to witness his suffering." The words sent a shudder through the room. "And who, I ask, would have such knowledge of poisons?" Poirot's voice turned sharp as a blade. "Who would understand the precise dosage, the delay of symptoms? Who else but a doctor?" All eyes turned to Dr. Graves. He gave a derisive snort. "That's ridiculous," he said flatly. "Plenty of people could have obtained strychnine." "Perhaps," Poirot allowed, "but not many would know how to use it with such control." I saw Graves' fingers twitch slightly against his chair. A small tell, but Poirot had already seized upon it. "You were seen near the greenhouse days before Whitcomb's death," Poirot said. "You claimed you were gathering shears for the roses, and yet—" He produced a small glass vial from his pocket, holding it delicately between 2 fingers. "This was found beneath the floorboards of the stables, your stolen medical bag, and inside a vial of strychnine." Dr. Graves sat perfectly still, his expression carefully neutral. Poirot tapped the vial against his palm. "Ah, but this was not your only crime, was it, mon cher doctor?" He turned abruptly, his eyes flashing. "Victor Trent, his murder was messy, violent. Unlike Whitcomb's, it was not premeditated. Why?" The room held its breath. "Because," Poirot answered, "he found something." Miss Hartley let out a sharp breath. "Yes, he found something," Poirot repeated. "Something in Lord Whitcomb's files, something that put his life in danger, a record of payments, blackmail, bribes. He had been keeping secrets, had he not?" Poirot's gaze bore into Graves. "And one of those secrets was yours." Graves' jaw was set like iron. "Whitcomb knew," Poirot went on. "He knew that the railway crash which killed your sister was caused by a cover-up, a falsified brake report, approved in your very own name. I started. Graves signed off on the faulty brakes? Poirot gave a small nod. Oui, Hastings, he was complicit, perhaps not at first, but when the tragedy struck, he accepted a bribe to keep silent. Trent uncovered this. He tried to use it to his advantage. Poirot sighed. But blackmail, mon ami, is a dangerous game. Graves gave a short laugh. You think I killed him to keep him quiet? I know you did, Poirot said smoothly. And Mercer? He let the name hang in the air. He had proof as well, did he not? Perhaps a ledger, a letter. Whatever it was, he became a threat, and so you dealt with him as well. Silence. Graves shook his head, but I could see the stiffness in his shoulders. Poirot knew it too. You are a man of science, Dr. Graves, Poirot said quietly. But you let your emotions rule you. The poison was careful, the ice axe, that was rage. The doctor was very still. Poirot leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. You wanted revenge for your sister, but you did not stop there. You became the very thing you despised. You became a killer. Graves looked at Poirot for a long moment. Then with slow deliberation, he exhaled. Damn you, he muttered. Poirot straightened. Hastings, fetch the constable. Graves gave a short, mirthless laugh. So this is it, then? He leaned back in his chair. And what now, Poirot? Justice? Poirot met his gaze unflinchingly. Justice, monsieur, is not always found in a courtroom, but it will find you nonetheless. A crash of thunder echoed through the manor as Graves was led away. Poirot dusted his hands, adjusting his cuffs. And so, Hastings, we have our answer? The storm had begun to wane, the wind retreating into the night, and in Whitcomb Hall the long-stopped clock ticked once more. I frowned, something still unsettled in my mind. Poirot had exposed Dr. Graves as the murderer, yet one detail remained unanswered. Poirot, there's something I still don't understand, I said. He turned to me, expectant. The Raven, I continued. The note, 3 down, who's next? But by then all 3 murders had already taken place. Why would Graves send such a thing? It makes no sense. Poirot smiled faintly. Noel Hastings, our murderer, would not announce his intentions. The note came from someone who suspected the truth, but feared speaking it aloud. I scanned the guests. My eyes settled on Miss Genevieve Hartley, her hands clenched in her lap. You knew something, Poirot said gently. She swallowed hard. I wasn't certain, but after Uncle Alaric, Victor Trent, and Mercer were killed, I felt the danger wasn't over. I had no proof, just a feeling. But why a raven? I asked. She hesitated. Uncle Alaric was superstitious. He said ravens were omens. I thought if I sent a message that seemed like a warning, the killer might slip. Poirot nodded. And indeed, Dr. Graves did. He panicked, moved too quickly. But by then Mercer was already dead. Miss Hartley gasped. I never meant— You are not to blame, mademoiselle, Poirot reassured her. You sensed danger before it struck? Silence stretched across the room, the storm outside fading. I exhaled. And the raven itself? Just coincidence? Poirot smiled. Coincidences are rare, Hastings, but the true warning came from Miss Hartley herself. The guilty mind fears shadows where none exist. Poirot adjusted his cuffs. And so, Hastings, justice is served. Our case is complete. The grandfather clock chimed. The last storm clouds drifted away, leaving Whitcomb Hall behind with its long-kept secrets. Thank you for tuning in to Cafe Stories. If you enjoyed the intrigue and suspense, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated on more captivating detective adventures. Your support keeps the stories coming and the mysteries alive.